That's good. Brian, you want to go first?
Yeah, hey George, how you doing? Yeah, I was muting myself because I'm in a car. It's a little noisy.
That's okay.
And I'm able to do this Zoom conference because I'm in a Tesla self-driving car. It's great. My name is Brian McLernan. This is my beautiful wife Sharon. I'm a 5th degree black belt under the AJA. I teach in Westminster, Maryland. I've been studying since lost track, probably 2002. And we were able to pick back up after COVID, kind of a skeleton crew, but we're back and I'm back teaching. And I've known George a long time.
Okay. Tom, quick intro.
Yeah, I've also known George a long time. I guess I've been doing this about 15 years. I'm based in Baltimore, Maryland. I also have a background in Japanese swordsmanship and some Korean and Chinese martial arts, but happy to be here. Always interesting discussions with George.
Okay. John? Owen.
I started with Budoshin Jujitsu back in 2004. I've gotten my 1st degree black belt. Very happy about that. I also work with a local dojo, American Jiu-Jitsu of Maplewood, who teaches a slightly different style of jiu-jitsu, but still a lot of fun and to practice. I personally teach a lot of kids jiu-jitsu, looking for ways to improve on that.
Okay. Let's see who joined us here. Okay. Who do we have next yet? Eric?
Yes, hi. I've been studying Jiu-Jitsu, Budoshin Jujitsu for, I would say, since 2018. That's when I started studying the program. Haven't been able to really train it until, I would say, basically the start of the pandemic, so 2020 is when I started to really train it and really understand it. But I've also, basically throughout my entire life, I've been studying different martial arts from Kung Fu Sensu all the way up to boxing and karate, along with Krav Maga. So I've been through all the various martial arts, and I'm also I'm about, depending on traffic, it could be 30 minutes to 2 hours. I'm away from Sensei Kirby. So okay. I'm over in the Sherman Oaks area.
Chris?
Yes, Chris Kadamian from beautiful Burbank, California. And I'm a big fan of martial arts.
Okay, Dave.
You're muted, Dave. You're muted.
You're muted, Dave.
My phone just muted me. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Your keyboard is bigger than you are.
Well, I can read that keyboard. But anyways, this is very, very rigged. This is last minute. My computer, I just turned it on 5 minutes to 11, and it's like it's going all kinds of crazy. So I grabbed my phone and said, let me see if I can do this Zoom meeting by phone.
Okay.
My background is in karate, and I've been studying with Sensei Kirby, I believe, since 2005. And I'm 4th degree in Budoshin Jujitsu, and 1st degree in a mixture of Shotokan, Shido-Ryu, and Shotokai karate. And I love teaching. Teaching is my passion, and I've enjoyed teaching self-defense since 2007, but actually before, just I wasn't authorized. They let me teach in the dojo because they knew my proclivities.
Okay, next on the board is Darren, who's in Chile, out in Coachella.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Darren Mellery from New Orleans, but here in Palm Desert or Palm Springs, whatever you want to call it, Desert Springs, Palm Desert, whatever, California this morning. And yes, I'm here for Coachella, but been studying traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu since 1989. My first pleasure and honor of meeting Sensei Kirby and interacting with him on the mat was in 2004. And I've studied his books well before that and continue to do so today.
Okay, is there anyone I missed? No. Okay, great. We got about 5 or 6 people with us today. First topic is, do political discussions belong in the dojo? And I'm going to define that somewhat just to give us, because I know people talk politics, but it's, let's say it's, to give it some direction, where a sensei advocates a particular political leaning. I'm trying to put it very tactfully, or is tolerant of only, you know, and advocates what he believes within the dojo and during class. So I guess that's, do political discussions belong in the dojo?
They belong anywhere, really.
They belong what?
I think you see in early Europe, the women's suffragette movement, there was a lot of politics being discussed in dojos then among the women that would get out and were popular at the who would defend the women's suffragettes. I'm sure we know about that. All know about it. But historically, there was that happened.
I mean, and I know there are some sensei that are extremely, I'm going to say it tactfully again, extremely politically conservative. Some are very liberal. Some bounce back and forth just to see what they can dig up. Does anybody have any?
I think this, to an extent, it depends on knowing your audience. I've been in small classes where we all know each other's political leanings pretty well, and we can talk openly about that. But sometimes if it's a class that you may not know very well or on intimate terms as friends, you may start going down some political paths that could unintentionally put off some people, just because you don't know how they feel, and you may assume that they're politically as conservative or liberal as you are. And I think you just have to be careful of that, and just don't assume that somebody might agree with you, and try to be tactful.
Okay, anything else anyone want to do with this, or?
I thought that was a good point, Dave. I mean, Tom had put that together pretty well, but I guess that the political topic can go, you know, it can not only be about political beliefs and what your preference is, but it could be about any topic. And I believe that goes the same thing for pretty much any one of those sensitive topics that could be out there today.
Okay, good remark, Darren. I think, you know, it's not just political, it can be just about anything. And the heart lies, as where do you go? As Thomas said, it's you have to kind of gauge your audience in terms of what you can say.
Martial arts. Oh, there he is. Hey, George.
Back.
We were just going on without you a little. There you go. Now you're connected to audio. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Let me.
We can hear you too.
1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Good.
Okay, we have.
Just fine.
We were just talking about FB.
Can anybody count higher than 3?
We were just getting into ethics and
Right.
ethics discussion in the dojo, and how it may be connected to politics or not. I was just going to throw in that Budoshin, just as George now arrives, Budoshin does have the sort of trans-political integrity, respect, humility set of values that really aren't based in any one political set of beliefs, but I think can be applied especially if there's somebody misbehaving or there's somebody being arrogant. You may ask a student, well, does this really abide by the value of humility that we try to perpetuate, or is this really is this showing respect to someone else? Those are core values, I think, probably in any dojo. Then you can look back to Japanese history and look at Bushido and how far you might want to explore the code of the samurai. I know it's controversial whether all samurai really abided by Bushido or how seriously it was taken, but that's worth exploring. In Korean arts, you've got the Hwarang-do code that warriors abided by. Those are all sorts of codes that usually go beyond contemporary politics and can be applied no matter what your leanings are. They may be worth exploring.
It's the dojo kun. You know, traditional dojos always had a dojo kun. So if you walk into a traditional dojo, it's usually just kind of listed there. You know, basically it's kind of a summary of the code of ethics, you know, if you're going to be a student there. So
Right. It's I think that's what's many times saves us from having I don't know whether you want to call it. It's not that they're inappropriate discussions, but you have to choose your time and place. And whereas, you know, in my classroom, I mean, the kids knew they could bring up almost anything they wanted, and we had discussions that administrators would avoid like the plague. But it's different from doing that in a government class and doing that in a martial arts class where your intent is to provide some martial arts skill and, you know, some moral training and moral tolerance and other things of this sort. And it really doesn't have a place within the dojo. I mean, I have some of my black belts. We have some interesting discussions off the mat, by phone, over coffee, things of that sort. But I've never, how do you say, it's never been to the extent where it's affected our friendship, because there's a mutual relationship that mutual respect that exists. You know, and I think that's the guideline. It's just, you know, you, regardless of what is said, the person has, you know, the person has a high level of integrity, and you have to respect their opinion, recognizing it as an opinion rather than the word of God. And I think that's, you know, probably where the issue is. And because of that, it's not really, in my book, it's not really appropriate for the dojo, within the dojo. Because as Tom said, you may end up offending people who believe otherwise, or you might end up offending people because they're not there for political discourse. They're there to learn a martial art and the values that go along with it. So, is there anything else we want to do with this, or?
I think you tied it together very well, Sensei.
Okay, let's move on to a friendlier topic. Let's finally put to rest the obfuscation between the terms technique and kata. Our current kokoro contains yet again multiple mentions by confused practitioners. The distinction between these two terms is very clear, yet remains hidden to many. We can unequivocally straighten this out. And I'm going to let you start, Dave.
Happily.
Right off the top.
Very happily, I will jump on this one. It's interesting because in karate, these terms never seem to confuse anybody. And when I arrived to jiu-jitsu, I noticed they were confused a lot, but I just figured, well, you know, it'll get itself sorted out. And I'm reading a couple of the more recent kokoros and it keeps coming up. And it's like, Okay, why don't we see if what worked for us in karate might also work in jujitsu? So I can draw some analogies here, but I've also got a one-page article in one of my books that clarifies technique versus form. The waza and kata is the subtitle. Bottom line, if we were to just draw an analogy, if we were to say that techniques, let's imagine a train. Techniques are the individual train cars. We string techniques together to form kata. We string waza together to form kata. We string techniques together to form forms, to create forms. And we all know that form and kata are synonymous, and technique and waza are synonymous. So I'll use them interchangeably. But the bottom line is this: if each individual train car is a technique, we string them together to form a train. That train is a form. So it's just very simple. You can string techniques together to get forms, but you can't string forms together to get techniques. They're very different that way. Forms are combinations of techniques. Multiple technique flow is extremely long forms. But that's another topic. So to me, it's very simple. As soon as I hear waza, I think technique, I think individual, an individual item, a punch, okay, a kick. And I explain in my book that it can be a lot of other things. In jiu-jitsu, we have typically an attack, a block, a strike, a throw, and then some form of submission. Okay, so those five items, which is how we teach: attack, block, strike, throw, submit. Each one of those is a form. And each one individually is a technique. The attack is a technique, the block, the strike, the throw, and the grapple, or the submission. It is no more complicated than that in my book, and anything else just kind of confuses people. So that's where I am with it. But I bring that perspective from what I learned in karate to our jiu-jitsu. Now, I want to be quiet, and I want to learn from everybody else here and find out where this works for them and where it doesn't. And I love being wrong. So somebody jump in and make me wrong.
Okay.
I'd like to throw in a few points if you don't mind.
Yes,
So you have technique, you have kata, and you have waza. There are three terms. We're mainly trying to clarify technique and kata. I do have some familiarity with karate. I'm a Shotokan myself, and yes, you have the technique, which are the individual techniques that apply. You have the shuto. You have, say, a throw like a serenage, and then you have the kata, which is, as you say, the form. These are the string of techniques to create the forms. So I'm not going to add any more to what you have just said, other than I want to talk about waza, which is, to me, it's an application. It is a much more general term to me, mostly because I also have a background in judo. So if we have something like ashi waza, foot technique, that can mean it's basically you have a category of foot techniques. And that's how I'm looking at with the term waza. And if it could be, let's say I go with a specific technique in judo, sasai is one of the very popular throws where I pull my opponent and I block his foot, and he's going over my foot. That would be a form of ashiwaza. It's a general term for like a category of techniques. Now, when I am talking about like in these meetings, when I mention a technique, I'm doing this technique, I'm doing that technique. I am talking about those individual techniques. Say, for example, sasai or ippon seoi-nage, or even just a straight punch. That those are just individual techniques. I think a lot of people are getting confused with kata and waza in Budoshin Jujitsu, because you have kata, which is basically a form. If I'm going to do an ippon seoi-nage, there's a certain way to that is being taught. I have a block. I go into ippon seoi-nage, and I do the technique, and I follow up with a submission. And then you have the waza, which again is a general category. Now in a way it is also application. So now we're taking that same set of movements, and now we're adding kuzushi, distraction, and what have you, and we're making it into a more likely self-defense set of techniques to create the waza, the application. So now that same ippon seoi-nage, I have a block, I have a punch to distract, and I can go in for the ippon seoi-nage, because the kuzushi has already been created from that punch, and I followed the rest of the series with a submission or hold or a pin, and that would be the entire waza. It's like now we're taking the kata and we're making it more alive. So I think that is where a lot of people have been getting confused, is differentiating between kata and waza. But in general, techniques, individual techniques. Then you have the kata, which is the string of those techniques, and then you have the waza, which can be it's like it's a category of those techniques in a kata, and you can make it more applicable. So I guess that's how I could have it formed.
Anyone else provide some input?
I hear what you're saying. If you say, ashi waza, or if you say foot techniques, again, technique and waza are used interchangeably. If I'm going to do an ippon seoi-nage, that's a throw. That's a technique. If in demonstrating that, I have somebody attack me, I block, I strike, and then I throw using the ippon seoi-nage, and then I submit by whatever choice of a submission. Now I've got a string of techniques, and now I've got a kata. So, do you call the ippon seoi-nage that I just did a kata or a waza? If you call it a waza, you're back to saying that the ippon seoi-nage is one thing, but in demonstrating it, I used techniques, combination, flow, 5 items, 5 parts: attack, block, strike, throw. And the throw is the ippon seoi-nage, but it's still only just one technique. So if we can just simply think of technique as synonymous with waza, ashi waza, or foot technique, or foot techniques, it's still a category. Sure, you can say I've got Seneca waza. I've got other forms of but it'd be the same thing as saying shoulder techniques, elbow techniques, knee techniques. He's a waza.
And those would be considered the waza, the category of those techniques.
But
right?
Take the word waza out and replace it with technique, and you still have the same. You just have a category of techniques. You don't need to distinguish it by saying, well, that's waza. It's techniques. It's just like it's waza. is what I'm saying. Just it's in English. We have English that says technique and form, and then we have Japanese that says waza and kata. To me, it's just no more complicated than that. As soon as we say, well, there's technique, but there's also waza, I say waza and technique are perfectly synonymous. I use them that way. I don't separate them out and say, well, when I'm doing a certain technique, I also string together these other things. I can demonstrate just an ippon seoinage as a singular technique without the attack, without the block, without the strike, and without the submission. Here's an ippon seoinage, bang, done, technique. As soon as I add anything else to it, now I'm beginning to put together a form. Categories can confuse the issue if we say, well, waza means a category instead of waza means a technique. That's just how. And I've noticed when I work with my students that when I explain that technique is waza, waza is technique, form is kata, kata is form, then there is no confusion. They just use it. They just do it. And here's what else is kind of cool, I think. On a deeper level, technique is a bunch of other things. It's ki, it's kazushi, it's mushin. I mean, there's all kinds of other things that that go deeper. They're still technique, and we can say, well, are they waza or not? Well, if they're technique, in my book, they're waza. If they're waza, in my book, they're technique. And in karate, we'd say, you know your forms or you know your katas. It meant the same thing. If you have a technique down, a karate technique, if you have a karate waza, same thing. So to me, to say, well, in a certain situation, this technique is going to be a waza. I say in every situation, the technique's a waza. And that's where we might differ, and that's where I want somebody to correct me, dadgummit, because I'm missing something here.
Let me throw my 2 cents in here.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I sent you guys a thing ahead of time because Dave and I have talked about this, I don't know how many times before. And before I wrote this down on the pre-comments, I did some thinking because there is confusion and there needs to be some clarification. If this may not make a lot of people happy, but that's okay. If we're looking at the belt tests, and we have a kata section and a waza section, and again, everything is relative to the context it is used in, and I think that's one thing that Dave is trying to stress anyway. In the kata section, we're looking for a particular form. Koshinagi hip throw, drop throw, tewaza hand technique, whatever is listed there, we want to see an example of that. Whatever else is there, the block, deflection, submission, the ki, that might keep the examiner awake, but everything else isn't that relevant. What we want to see is how, if I ask for ippon seoinage, I want to see how well that ippon seoinage was done, that one particular form, that one particular technique, okay? Waza section is, here's an attack, do whatever you want to defend yourself. And whatever you do, as long as it's can come under jujitsu technique, it's legitimate. Waza is as I said here, is any technique or combination of kata techniques or movements used to defend yourself from street type attacks or continuous street types attacks. It's what you in effect do. It's not necessarily planned. Okay. It's your reaction. I know there are some that may say the waza is technique, as David said, which it is, because if you combine a whole bunch of moves together, you have a waza.
As soon as you combine techniques, you got a form.
And right, and you can combine you can combine your movements, and as in karate, and I think this is where the conflict is. In jujitsu, we say ippon seoinage, or hip throw, is a kata. In karate, you may have a whole, depending on what belt rank you're going to, and I'll admit that I am not ranked in karate, so maybe some ignorance on my part. In karate, the person is going through a whole series of movements, and that's referred to, and he may be doing it in the 4 directions, you know, and against, you know, simulated attackers or whatnot, and that's considered a kata, a form. It's a combination of movements, techniques. Okay, and I think that's where the core problem is that in karate it's considered one thing. In jiu-jitsu, kata is considered something else. And go ahead.
I have a question. So if I'm doing the waza portion of a test and somebody throws a punch and I block it such that I break their arm, I've used one technique, a block. If I block that punch and then go into an ippon seoinage and throw them and then submit them, I've used a form to defend myself instead of a technique. And I moved from waza to kata.
This is a philosophical discussion.
I combined other techniques. I didn't just stop with one. If he throws a punch and I duck out of the way,
that's a waza.
Then that's a technique. That's a single technique. If I duck out, I go around him and then do a rear throw, and then when he lands on the ground, I put my knee on his neck. I've gone from a single action to defend myself to multiple actions to defend myself. So I'm just using a to defend myself instead of a technique.
Okay, there are, and I'm sure that if you're very proficient, you can play with an attacker until after they're dead.
That is a true statement.
And all of that, whatever you did to humiliate this poor attacker, is a waza, because it's a combination of whatever you put together, possibly without any thinking taking place. I know we did. Yeah. Okay. You know, that all those moves, whether it be a single hit, I mean a single block, which breaks the other person's arm, which I've seen happen, or it's a block going into a, you know, then into a strike, then into a throw, then into a submission, and then bring them up into a come along, and using that come along to throw them into a window or out of a window, whatever, you know, all of that is a waza. It's your whatever. It's a waza is any single technique, any single movement or combination that are used to demonstrate your knowledge of the art. I mean, I know these are not cut and dry definitions, and I think that's part of the issue. You also
do you mind if I can jump in just really quick, because I think I am starting to really understand the confusion right there, since I'm hearing both Dave Clark and George Kirby going back and forth. I can since I am also studying. I've been studying this art from the ground up myself, and I do see a little bit of the confusion. So I think what both Dave Clark and George Kirby are saying, you have the kata. Nobody's contesting that. It's a series of techniques to create a form. In terms of testing, you have the kata portion. You're doing a form to show that one technique, right? Now, when it comes to the waza, this is how I'm starting to differentiate it. You have the waza portion of the Budoshin test, okay, and that is you have this one technique. We'll keep using Ippon Serenagi because I think we all love that throw. That's that one technique. Show me how you can use that in any applicable way to show that you understand how to use it. It doesn't have to follow the kata. Is show me how you can use this one technique any other way. Like for example, in the kata, we have the block, we have the Ippon Serenagi, you throw, and then we have the submission. And the waza, someone gets me into a forearm choke, okay, Ippon Serenagi, that's another way. I'm just showing different ways of using that one technique, but I'm just showing it. I'm just showing different ways on how to do the waza, that one technique. So I think that's where the confusion is coming from. Is yeah, the kata portion, show the form, you have the waza. Now show me how to use that one technique in any other scenario that you see fit, depending on the context of the attack. So I think that's how that's one way you can help differentiate between the kata and the waza. It's when it comes to the Budoshin testing.
Okay,
With the waza portion, we're focusing on what we do. In the waza portion, there's one technique coming at you in the form of an attack.
but the attack is the attack. Okay, what Eric is saying, basically with the waza is that I try to stress is, at some point, the attack is almost irrelevant. You could if on most tests, I'm sure most of you could use Ippon Serenagi for every one of those attacks, almost every one of them, and you're using the same form, Ippon Serenagi, or one arm hip throw. You're going into it different ways. You may have different things that you do before you go into the actual throw. There may be different things you do after the actual hip throw. Okay. But the waza is, this is just, what's your automatic reaction? It's just street self-defense is not the same as doing a kata. You may be doing a kata in the process of defending yourself on the street, but doing an ideal kata, as in karate, or if I say this person is going to attack me and I'm going to block it, you don't think of all this stuff ahead of time, because if you did, you'd end up going to jail. And there have been some karate and martial arts people, because they realized they were going into a street situation, and they said, I decided ahead of time what I was going to do to protect myself. And they end up in jail, because now the defense attorney can say, it was a premeditated attack. This black belt or what have you encouraged this other person to try to attack him. I mean, that's our legal system, but which is a whole different ballgame. But I look at kata as simply a particular movement, hip throw. If you're doing blocking, is your blocking clean? Is it done properly? Is your body in the correct position? All these, if you're demonstrating a particular technique, whoever is watching you should be looking to see that you're doing all the elements of that technique correctly. And the attack is irrelevant. If you're in the waza section, okay, do something for someone coming at you with 5 knives. Okay, I don't care what technique you use. Even if you're, what's the guy from Washington? He used to walk around martial arts camps with a sawed-off shotgun under his trench coat. And he'd stick it up people's noses to see what they would, black belts, to see what they would do. It doesn't matter what the, defend yourself. Do something. And that's what waza is in my books. It's your ability to put the stuff together without thinking into something that works for you. And that's the key. It has to work for you. And when I've tested, I've seen some people put stuff together and I say, I don't know how they did it, but it worked. And that's, I mean, that's the nicety of knowing your katas, your forms. That they're just sitting there in your brain and you just pull up and use them as necessary. I think
If I could just throw in really quickly, some of this has to do with differences of context.
Yes.
Like with hard martial arts, where there's an emphasis on punching and kicking, karate, or a Korean art that I've done, there's an emphasis on learning old forms. In karate, they're called kata. In Korean, they're hyungs, but they're these extended single person activities where you defend against attack multiple attackers, and they become progressively more complex as you advance in rank. That's commonly known to hard martial artists. That's known as kata, a form, but that embraces a huge number of individual movements.
Yes.
But in jiu-jitsu, it's always been maybe this reflects the flexibility of the Japanese language or something, but it's always kata. Kata are the smaller parts that compose a waza, the smaller individual movements that compose something more complex. So to me, I just think of it as if a karate person says this is a kata, I know what they mean. It's some pre-choreographed kind of series of movements, but it's a different use in a different martial art.
Okay. I think different martial arts tend to interpret things differently. I think that just naturally happens. I think the key problem here is the word technique, because technique can refer to, I'd like to see you do that technique again, referring to a hip throw. Okay, technique can be your footwork going into the hip throw was sloppy. You need to work on your footwork. Okay, that can be technique. Technique can be, it could even be the attacker. You're not attacking with sufficient energy. Technique can refer to, I think, almost anything. Even how you're stirring scrambled eggs. There is a right way to do it, There, I've seen at least half a dozen cooks come up with at least 6 different ways, and they're all the only correct way to scramble eggs. And so I think technique, because it's the quote unquote English word, it can apply to so many different situations and so many different things. It could even be, you don't have any key in your technique execution. Oops, kata execution, and so I think that's where some of the confusion comes from, is from the English words rather than well, maybe not the Japanese too, but then it's our interpretation of the Japanese words. And I'm only working from what Seki and some of the other ryu jiu-jitsu I've seen have used the terminology. And yes, I do agree that the terminology in jiu-jitsu and karate for waza and kata, are different. And I think sometimes the opposite of each other. And if we simply say, okay, in karate, this is how it's used, in judo, this is how it's used, in jujitsu, it's how it's used, it allows them all to be right. You can't make a phrase. Well, you couldn't. You can't make a burrito out of a slice of bread. Well, maybe you can, but it's not going to look or be the same. I'm trying to come up with some analogies that, they're stupid, but they make sense. So I think we need to, it's the context in which the words are used, I think, is what we have to recognize.
Thank you for sharing this, Sensei.
I don't know if that solves any problems or creates more.
Actually, it giving me an education, because the operative word here is context. Yeah.
Yes, context.
Yeah, there's also a lack of there's a lack of a particular term that I know is in karate, but it's not in judo, it's not in Budoshin Jujitsu, and that is I think it more applies to karate because of the kata, and it's bunkai. Bunkai is you're breaking down the kata. You're breaking down the forms into individual techniques and how you can apply those techniques in various scenarios. So in a way, that could be the waza portion of a Budoshin test. You're applying a bunkai to say ippon serenagi or to a waza, to a technique. So if we're trying to translate karate terms into Budoshin Jujitsu, that would be a term that I would use at bunkai. You have technique, waza, you have kata, forms, and you have bunkai, application.
Okay. Everybody else want to take a step into the bottomless pit?
I'll jump in here.
Go ahead.
As somebody that works with Japanese regularly, there's I think I never, I guess, realized until just now that this is an issue within Jiu-Jitsu. Because it really isn't, part of it is language, and then part of it is context. It's important to understand that these words are not unique to martial arts and the Japanese culture. Okay, so the kata, waza, bunkai, these are words that are used in other areas. Even if you're learning pottery or, regular schoolwork or whatever it is, it's just a part of the regular language. And sometimes when we try to translate things to English, well, things get lost, in translation. And I heard that talked about. It's also not unique to karate and jiu-jitsu and judo because they all use the same language. Understandably, people here can repurpose those words, for different reasons. And it doesn't necessarily make it incorrect, but that can happen too. And maybe that's what's happened here is, in jiu-jitsu, people started using words to represent one thing, and in karate, something else. But I guarantee you, if you go to Japan and train, over there, or train with a Japanese sensei here, there's no confusion. They all kind of use it the same way, to refer to it. So let me try to explain it as simply as I can based on my interaction and my experience with that culture. And same with Koreans, by the way. They use different words, as Tom indicated, but they follow the same format. So kata they use the word kata when they refer to any type of pattern. So in English, it's kind of a cross, we would say pattern or routine. that would be a kata. So if you wake up every day and you kind of follow a format, you count till 3, then you sit up, you stand up, you walk over, you brush your teeth, whatever you do, take a shower, put your clothes on, bottom first, top next, whatever your order is, that's your morning kata. Okay. And so it's a blueprint. It doesn't mean you're going to do it the same way every time, but that's kind of your routine. That's your pattern. And so maybe it becomes more obvious in a karate type of venue because they have longer ones, that they have put together. So when you watch it, it seems to go on for a few minutes, where in jiu-jitsu it ends quickly. But if you get up and you bow to if you dress a certain way, you bow to your opponent, you set up against each other a certain way, and then this person attacks, and then this person executes, and then you stand up, you bow, and then you go your own way. That whole thing is your kata because you approached it a very specific way. And you see this more happen in competitions. In karate, you can get up and do it by yourself. And maybe that's where the confusion is. But even in karate, when you're doing self-defense, a demonstration, if you get up, same thing, bow, and you face somebody and you do a technique and then you sit down, you also did a kata. Waza is probably, more accurately the technique of how you do things. And in between there's the bunkai. So I heard, Ippon Sayonage, for example. If you get up and you demonstrate that and it goes very quickly, maybe you punched them before and maybe you put a finishing lock, at the end. You say, okay, now I'm going to break it down for you, into more basic elements. Now you're in the process of bunkai. You're in the process of breaking down your kata. And then as far as the actual technique, there's 2 levels to that. There's the more obvious level where, turn your hips 45 degrees, lower your center of gravity. This is kind of your technique. And even like a potter, if they're making pottery, what technique are they using to make the pottery? Well, one person, does this with their hand a little bit more. The other one uses 2 hands. So each kind of has their own approach, their own technique. Since, like you said, for self-defense, you make it work for yourself. That's the technique there, and it doesn't have to be common. So the kata has to be common, for the people that are practicing it, but the technique doesn't have to be common. So you may show me your technique of how you're executing that, the little fine points that are happening that may not be as obvious. And I can learn from that, but I can tailor it to myself and tweak it a little bit. And then that's my technique. And both would be correct because, that's your approach to it and it works. And this is my approach and it works. But the kata can be the same. So if the kata calls for, turn left and do this and do that, that needs to be common. But what happens within that could be a little bit different. And then you have okuden, which is the hidden things. So these are things that are a little bit more subtle. And sometimes that's where the science lives. And that may not be as obvious. And a lot of times in the Japanese culture, at least the traditional approach, they will not show you that. That needs to be revealed over time.
What is that term, and could you spell it for us, please?
I'm sorry?
What is that term, and could you spell it for us?
Okuden. We spell everything phonetically, but I guess okay. I've never thought about it. It's just okuden. It's 3 words. That's referred to as the hidden things. And those things are there because in the old days, somebody would hop over the fence and peek at the practice, and so what they would do is they can copy what they see, which is the kata. So then they would go try to replicate that somewhere else, and they can replicate the kata. but that doesn't mean they understood the waza behind it, the technique. And even if they played close attention and picked up the technique, they still wouldn't understand the okuden. That needs to be experienced for a while, and then at some point, you can have a discussion, with the instructor, and that's only at the higher levels. So again, it's not a unique thing to martial arts. It's common to many things in the Japanese culture, Korean culture, whatever. I trained with both crowds, and so think of it that way. I think, Dave, you kind of used a good analogy, early on. It's kind of a simple way to explain it. It's kind of like a train. There's different cars, and each one of those cars can represent a technique, a waza, okay? You string them together, and it could become a kata. So a kata can have many different wazas in it. That is true, but it's also true that one car can represent a kata, and how you put that together and how you constructed it, would be the waza. And that's where the confusion is. It's a cultural thing. It's the same with water, because water is used in a lot of explanation in Japanese, the approach for martial arts. So if you go to Japan, you can say mizu for water, or you can say sui. So both refer to water, but depending on the context, like if you're asking for a glass of water, you wouldn't ask for sui, you would say mizu, because it's more contained. And sui would be more something that would be in a big body of water, but it still refers to water. Well, we don't have that here. Here we say lake, sea, ocean, or just glass of water. They don't have that there. So it's a little bit different. And it could be confusing, but pretty much everything everybody said is true depending on the context, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But don't think of it as martial arts, in this martial art, in that martial art. No, maybe that particular teacher, that particular dojo is using it in a certain context. And then we, without really understanding the background, pick up on that and say that's the truth. And then we go to try to replicate it. No, if you get into a deeper conversation, they'll tell you, no, it could be referred to as this too, but in our effort to understand it, we try to box it in, and then that becomes our truth. But it's a truth. It's not all inclusive. Anyway, hopefully that didn't confuse you guys more, but, and I'm certainly not an expert in it. It's just, my interaction with it, because we use it interchangeably depending on the situation.
To me, it's fascinating. It brought bunkai into this conversation. I think that's great. My definition of bunkai is quite simply the analysis and disassembly of kata. And along with that, one's personal application of that. And so that being said, the way that we're using bunkai could also be the way that Sensei Kirby is using waza. And that's,
well, yes and no, Dave. A bunkai literally translates to breaking down. So it's a process of, here's what you saw, one long string. Okay, so I'm going to break it down into, say, 5 strings. Once that breakdown has happened, then within each one of those 5 pieces, you can explain how you're approaching that piece, and that becomes the waza. Okay. So, but it's just breakdown. It's not necessarily, the analysis could be the waza. So.
Yeah. Just to compare bunkai with waza is where I'm going to enjoy processing that one for a while.
Yeah. So in English, I could say, all right, this is what I did. This is what I said. Now let me break it down for you. Once when I've said that, I just and I broke it down for you, I've just done bunkai. Okay. But then I say, now let me explain to you how I approach. Once I broke it down, let me explain to you how I approached each one of these sections, now I'm doing waza. So I know Sensei Kirby's gotten many books out there. I'm sure he's probably working on another one now. So if he says, here's the book, okay, let me break it down for you. There's 10 chapters in it. And in each chapter, this is the topic that I cover. Okay, now I've done kata and I've done bunkai. Then if I say, Sensei, how did you approach, this particular topic in this chapter? What was your thought process? What were you trying to accomplish? What was your thought process? How did you pen it down? Now he's going to explain to me the waza of that particular thing.
I'm just jotting this down here.
Oh.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris, for explaining all of that. There's a lot of very helpful insight into all of this.
Yeah.
Chris, would you say the book, chapter, topic, and thought process? The thought process is the waza. What would be synonymous with kata? Would it be book, chapter, or topic?
Yeah, that would be how he arranged the book, right? How he arranged the chapters. For example, why was chapter one? Why is there 10 chapters? That's kind of the breakdown of it. But the whole book would be, each chapter would teach you something different. So if you read like the Book of 10 Rings, for example, 5 Rings, for example, Miyamoto Musashi, right? That's kind of how he breaks it down for you. That breaks it down to different elements and things like that. But he wrote that book as kind of a kata for his students, so they don't make the same mistakes, and he broke down, why he passed this book on to them. Because if you just do the form, which is people get stuck in the form sometimes without really understanding why they're doing it, then it becomes just an exercise and like a dance, what's the purpose? You're not going to fight that way. So why are you practicing that way? Well, that's my book. That's how I carry the information. Remember, in the old days, people weren't, literate like we are now. It wasn't common, so they pass things on through kata, through this type of thing. So you look at Asian cultures and it's full of kata, from how to behave, how to greet people, how you bow, what level you bow at, depending. These are all tea ceremony is a kata. Even when you go to Europe, if you were summoned by the king or any type of royalty, there was a process in how you entered, how you dressed, how you greeted, when you spoke. This was a kata. And if you didn't do those things right, well, that could be the end of your life, in some circumstances. So the Asian culture, and in the old days, the European culture too, was very, very much established based on certain set of behaviors done a certain way in a certain order. And over time, as those things kind of went away, well, at least in some places to a certain extent, the practice was retained, maybe in hobby groups, maybe in enthusiasts, but the meaning was lost because those arenas no longer exist, right? I guess here in our culture, the dojo would be one of those places, certain types of ways you behave and do these things. So from the minute you enter, if in our dojo, you're required to, bow in, take your shoes off, put it in a certain place, line up a certain way. So before even class starts, you've already done a kata.
What's interesting, though, Chris, is that we use the word process to define waza. The thought process is involved in your presentation, is how we defined waza. And then the processes and that behavior is done a certain way in a certain order is a kata. And that's that right there, you got a little overlap or a little, that right there can be where some of the confusion lies. Yeah. You're definitely shedding a lot of light on it, and I thank you. between you and Sensei, I have a far better understanding of what's going on. Thank you both.
Thank you, guys. With that, unfortunately, I have to jump off. I do have to go teach and practice my kata and waza with the students. But it was great seeing you guys. I appreciate the time, and hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I also need to jump off too. I gotta head over. I gotta head out of town. So nice meeting with you guys.
Thanks.
Okay, take care. Dave, can you send me a copy of what you've written down?
All the notes I took today?
What? Yeah.
Yes, the notes I've written down, I'll be happy to. I've got a couple pages here.
Yeah.
I'd have to type them out because nobody else can read my writing.
Just
okay.
gave Dave a project for Saturday afternoon. That could take.
I'm taking notes too, and I'm hoping, if we put them together, I can read my hieroglyphics. So
That's great.
I used to drive my kids back crazy at school because sometimes I'd write stuff on the board. I'm left-handed, but I'm somewhat ambidextrous. But I'd write stuff on the whiteboard backwards with my right hand, and it would drive the kids crazy. They say, "We can't read that." I said, just get behind the whiteboard and you can read it. Okay. Anyway. Okay. I think with this topic, to bring it to some conclusion, there are some different interpretations of what kata and waza and technique are. I think the addition of Eric adding the word bunkai in there, and Chris adding the concept of okuden, I think may help resolve some issues or create further confusion. But a little confusion is always good. It makes life interesting.
Absolutely.
Okay. Next topic. I don't want to go on to the next topic today.
I'll tell you what, since I'm sitting here laughing because I'm thinking about anybody who listens to this discussion that we've had. And if they haven't practiced martial arts for any significant amount of time or at all, and they're listening to this, their brain's got to be swimming backwards upstream.
Right. And of course, we all know what we're talking about. Anyway.
Sometimes we pretend, but most of the times we get it right.
Anyway, do we want to go on to the next topic of if you have a young student who's moving along fairly well, do you create junior grade?
Yeah, that'd be a great place to start next week.
Do you want to start? How many do you want to start with that next time?
Right here.
Okay.
I'm busy processing what I just learned.
In the meantime, we can kind of figure out our kata and waza.
There you go.
And I'm just going to inject a bit of humor in terms of misinterpretation. There's I say the guideline here is that often what is said is not what was meant. There is an American businessman who was doing a presentation before a Japanese board of directors or what have you, and everything he said, the board of members would say hi, 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 and all the time he's thinking it means they're agreeing with them. And then at the end he asks them, "Are you going to go along with this?" And one of them says, "No." And he says, "But you all were saying hi." And finally, one of the Japanese businessmen said, "Well, for us in this context, Japanese height means I understand what you're saying, not yes." So
Yeah. We understand what you're saying and we reject it completely.
right. So anyway,
You can't be too subtle with the Japanese language, I guess.
no, you can't be. It's and I'm sure the same thing applies with. I've worked with a lot of ESL, English second language students, and the amount of mistakes they make in English, I mean, really can't credit, they're doing their best. But they really come up with some interesting words that they think fit in. So, but anyway, okay, we'll leave it there. And I apologize for the power outage earlier during our meeting. I had no control over that. Fortunately, it was short. And I think that's about it for today. So I want to wish everyone a happy Easter.
Thank you all.
Be nice to the Easter Bunny.
Your next call is going to be in 2 weeks, George.
Next meeting will be in 2 weeks, which is the May, was it May? I think tells me May 7th or something like that. Anyway, the first Saturday in May. And I'll get out an agenda. Through all this computer stuff, I managed to lose a critical file for the titling, and I have since found it with the help of the CyberLink company. And I think their tech support is located in another country, and their English is unique. And it took like a whole week of going back and forth before I finally got to someone who could put things down in a non-convoluted manner so that things made sense. So, and it was like, you know, it was like a 2 sentences of maybe 10, 15 words each. And it was just such a simple statement of how to do what I need to do. And I think it goes back to the same kata waza issue. You know, it's that you lose things in translation, or, you know, however you think. So anyway, enough of that. Have a great weekend. Like I said, be kind of the Easter Bunny. Don't eat too many eggs. And I think that's about it.
Go practice our kata and waza.
Pardon?
Go practice our kata and waza, however we define
Go
them.
practice some kata and waza. Right. So, anyway, take care.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye,
Happy Easter.
everybody.